Welcome back. Well, over the last few weeks we've been following the story of the ancient Israelites and how they were at one time slaves in Egypt, captives of the Pharaoh, treated without mercy and made to do back-breaking work, and how God raised up Moses to rescue them, and how by the mighty hand of God they were set free from Egypt and passed through the sea on dry land. Their destination is the promised land, and the book of Numbers tells us what happens on the journey there. It's a book about being in transit. It's about a journey which should have taken a couple of weeks, but which in the end takes 40 years. So it tells us about the time between salvation accomplished, they've been saved from Egypt, and salvation completed. They've not yet entered the promised land. They're in the in-between time, camping in the wilderness and moving from place to place. And so we're going to read a bit more from the book of Numbers, and this week we've got the girls' Bible study group reading for us, recorded at their last meeting on Zoom. So here's Madison and Rose with Rachel and Maxine.
The reading is taken from Numbers 11, verses 1 to 23.
Now the people complained about their hardships in hearing of the Lord, and when he heard them, his anger was aroused. Then fire from the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. When the people cried out to Moses, he prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So that place was called theyre, because fire from the Lord had burned among them. The rabble with them began to crave other food, and again the Israelites started wailing and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna." The manna was like coriander seed and looked like resin. The people went around gathering it and then ground it in a handmill or crushed it in a mortar. They cooked it in a pot or made it into loaves, and it tasted like something made with olive oil. When the dew settled on the camp at night, the manna also came down. Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance to their tents. The Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled. He asked the Lord,
"Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that you put the burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth? Why did you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant, to the land you promised an oath to their ancestors? Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, 'Give us meat to eat.' I cannot carry all these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you are going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me. If I have found favour in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin." The Lord said to Moses, "Bring me 70 of Israel's elders who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting that they may stand there with you. I will come down and speak with you there, and I will take some of the power of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them. They will share the burden of the people with you, so that you will not have to carry it alone. Tell the people, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow when you will eat meat. The Lord heard you when you wailed, 'If only we had meat to eat, we were better off in Egypt.' Now the Lord will give you meat, and you will eat it. You will not eat it for just 1 day, or 2 days, or 5, 10, or 20 days, but for a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it, because you have rejected the Lord who is among you, and have wailed before him, saying, 'Why did we ever leave Egypt?' But Moses said, 'Here I am among 600,000 men on foot, and you say, I will give them meat to eat for a whole month. Would they have enough if flocks and herds were slaughtered for them? Would they have enough if all the fish in the sea were caught for them?' The Lord answered Moses, 'Is the Lord's arm too short? Now you will see whether or not what I say will come true for you.'"
This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Well, since we're having to think a lot about a particular contagious disease at the moment, it's difficult to hear that reading and not see a kind of contagion going on. The contagion is the grumbling and the complaining. So it starts in verse 4, in the bit that Madison read, with a rabble having a moan about the food. And then that spreads to all the Israelites, and in verse 10 we hear that every family is wailing about it. And then even Moses catches it. That's the bit which Rose read from verse 11, where Moses has a right old grumble about his own personal lot. It's contagious, and its R number is off the scale. Well, I'm thinking next week of offering a few hints and tips on how to wither in the wilderness, how to die in the desert, how to make sure you never pass into the promised land. And perhaps surprisingly, grumbling is on that list, as we find here in the book of Numbers. But today I'm just going to look at a couple of aspects here in what we've just heard read. And the first thing is what the people forget, and the second thing is what the people need. So they're having this big old whinge about the food, because what they're getting to eat in the wilderness is manna. We're told about this in the book of Exodus, chapter 16. It's obviously pretty difficult to get food in the wilderness, and especially if you're on the move. And so God provides food for the people miraculously. It's there for them each morning when the dew has gone. And they decide to call it manna. And to listen to them complain about it, you'd think it was something really gross, like this. But the description in the text makes it clear that it was actually pretty much a luxury food. Verse 7, the manna was like coriander seed and looked like resin. The people went around gathering it and then ground it at a hand mill or crushed it in a mortar. They cooked it in a pot or made it into loaves, and it tasted like something made with olive oil. Well, olive oil is not so cheap. And it's not as though they were having to eat exactly the same meal day after day, because verse 8 makes it clear that it's pretty versatile stuff, this manna. You could make it into loaves. You could cook it in a pot. It's actually nothing like this. It's good food provided by God. But listen to how the people complain a few verses back, and look at how their complaining distorts their perspective. They begin to yearn for the life they used to have, or at least the life they thought they had back in Egypt. So we see them getting all nostalgic back in verse 5. They say, we remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but manna. They start to yearn for their old life in Egypt. But the thing is, life in Egypt was nothing like that. They were slaves. They were treated with great brutality. They were whipped and beaten. They had no freedom. They were forced into hard labour. It was, in fact, utter misery. But to listen to them now, you'd think they'd been given free rein of all of Egypt's finest restaurants. Oh, you remember that amazing Michelin 3-star place down by the Nile? Oh, the fish they served there. If only we could go there again. It's as if life was just one gastronomic high followed by another for them. But in reality, it was nothing like that for them. Their perspective is completely distorted. It's the danger of looking back through rose-tinted glasses. So what the people are forgetting on the one hand is actually how things really were back then. And their forgetting represents a lack of gratitude to God for all that he has done to bring them out of it. And on the other hand, what they're also forgetting is that they are journeying to the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And their forgetting that represents a lack of faith in what God will do for them in the future. And so the result is that they are unable to live faithfully in the present. And they grumble and they groan and they murmur and they moan. Well, we're in a wilderness time ourselves right now. And perhaps this is a lesson to us not to look back and wish that things were as they used to be, but to live faithfully in the present with confidence that we have a God who can be relied upon. Some of our musicians have recorded a song called Waymaker to be part of our worship this week. And if you know it, you can join in with your own voice where you are. If you don't, you can listen and let it minister to you. And I asked Anna, who you'll see on the video, how she thought it might best help us. And I was struck by her reply to me on WhatsApp. She said, it's an encouragement to respond to what is happening by looking up and out from ourselves, looking to God to help us through his grace and healing. If only the Israelites in the wilderness had done that. But I noticed that Waymaker is a song which is addressed to Jesus as God. And so before we leave the wilderness for today, it's worth noticing something else. And that is what the people need. So a repeated pattern in the book of Numbers is that Moses intercedes for the people. He prays to God for them. And you see that if you go back to the start of this chapter, back again to the bit that Madison read. In those first few verses, we're told that the Lord's anger burned because of the people's faithlessness. But then Moses prayed and the Lord's anger died down. And that happens on a number of occasions if you read the book through. Now, I mean, we don't want to think too much about God's anger, I know, because we like to think of him as we think of Father Christmas. You know, there might be a vague threat that he might not bless you, but it's not really all that serious. Well, there's obviously more to think about around all of this. But the idea that there might need to be a mediator between God and us is a very ancient one. And here, Moses is it. He stands between God and the people. Well, how does he do in the rest of chapter 11? That bit that Rose read from verse 11 onwards. How would you grade his mediation effort there? What happens in actual fact is that he completely loses the plot. He catches the grumbling disease himself, and he has a big rant at God about how unfair it all is. And in those 5 verses from verse 11, Moses refers to himself no fewer than 20 times in the original Hebrew. It's become all about him, and he propels his mediator role out of the window. And it's just a small indication that what is really needed is a mediator who will not make it all about him. One who can bear the leadership of God's people without growing weary or frustrated. Hebrews chapter 7 verse 25, speaking about Jesus, tells us this: therefore he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Even when his disciples would betray him or abandon him, he prayed for them. Indeed, he even bore the judgment curse that we deserve because of our grumbling and unbelief. And in exchange, he gave us the blessing that was his by rights. He is a greater Moses, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. If you want a blessing in the wilderness right now, well, turn to Jesus and look for it in him.